Alright guys, the video that you're about to watch is going to be a rather long and detailed explanation of what an officer goes through when they are wrongfully terminated by a police department. This is the situation that I currently find myself in. Those of you that may or may not know, I was wrongfully terminated by the Columbus Division of Police due to the things that I've said and done on social media. The city, as it turns out, is not very fond of officers when they point out what I believe is corruption and incompetence in local government and the kind of the witch hunt to go after police officers. I pointed that out. I became a target of this witch hunt, and I find myself currently unemployed fighting to get my job back. The video that you're going to watch is a long, detailed explanation of that. It's a little bit boring at times. I apologize, but I don't really know how else to put that out there. Along the lines of being wrongfully terminated and finding myself unemployed, one of the tactics by the city, knowing that they're going to terminate someone in a termination that's not going to stand up to the test of arbitration, is the punishment itself is making that officer uncomfortable and having a difficult time paying his bills. The way that you can help me in that fight is help me pay my bills. This is a hard thing for me to ask for, but I'm going to do it anyway. I've linked my personal PayPal in the description of this video. You should be watching a little clip behind me on how to help support me. If I can get enough people to donate as little as $10 a month, honestly, that will go a long way to help providing financial support to my family as I go through this time, because as of right now, I probably have a minimum of 6 months until I can get my job back, get back to work, start working some overtime to kind of replenish the reserves that I've had to spend down while I'm going through this time. If you're able to donate a little bit of your income to me, it would help me immensely. My family appreciates it more than you know. Without further ado, I'd like to get to the video and just say thank you. Thank you very much for your support. I'll talk to you guys soon. Alright guys, today's video is going to be a little update on the process that I'm going through currently to get my job back after being fired by the Columbus Division of Police because of my social media accounts and because of this YouTube channel. This is a video that I have tried to make multiple times. Not only have I tried to make it multiple times, but I've made multiple versions. I'll make a version of this video, I'll send it off to my attorney. My attorney will basically say, no, don't do this. One of the quotes that I get from my attorney, and I'll say it as best I can verbatim. He says, ideally, under these circumstances, we want to remain radio silent. We don't want to say anything publicly between the time you get fired to the time that you go to your arbitration hearing. The reason for that is because this is a legal battle. It's not through like the courts per se, but it's still basically a court proceeding. So you know, it's important that you try your case in court, not in the public. The public perception is not as important as, you know, what happens in that courtroom. So as much as I would like to come out and give you guys all of the information about every single thing that has been said and done during these investigations, right now is not the appropriate time for me to do that. I promise you I will, because I stand very firm behind my statements when I say I was fired due to my First Amendment activity. I've got the documents, everything I have to prove my case, and I'm very excited to be able to present that to you when it is appropriate. Right now is just not that time. I mentioned that I still have a hearing coming up. I have that hearing coming up very soon, and that is a hearing with an arbitrator where he will decide if the city acted appropriately or if the city acted inappropriately and rule in my favor. The best thing that I can do in this video today for you guys is probably just describe the disciplinary process. If you understand the process, you'll understand what it is that I'm going through and kind of the timeline that we're going to have as far as getting a decision. So I'm going to start kind of way back at the beginning. And this isn't necessarily with my case, but this is with all cases in general. Because one of the questions that I get from people is, aren't you represented by a union? What is the union doing for you? Or from other police officers are saying, hey, what the hell is the FOPs doing? Where's the FOP in all of this? You know, you have to understand how the process works to understand what it is that the FOP is doing. You also have to understand what they can and cannot do, what their limitations are. So the discipline process as a police officer. If a police officer is accused of doing something wrong, that police officer is investigated. The investigation will either clear the officer or say the officer did the wrong thing. This is very basic stuff. This can be anything from, a very serious accusation, like saying that an officer is committing robbery or defrauding people or stealing drugs out of the property room. It can also be something as simple as an officer being rude and discourteous to a caller, tell them to go F themselves rather than take a report. So if there's an accusation against an officer, that goes to internal affairs, generally speaking. The Columbus Division of Police also has an inspector general's office. The investigation will say, let's just say the investigation finds that the officer did the wrong thing. The officer violated policy. The internal affairs office will put together this packet and send it back to the chain of command. That packet is going to say, this officer violated policy, and here is how he violated policy. Internal Affairs or the Inspector General's office does not recommend discipline. The Internal Affairs sergeant or commander or lieutenant, whoever, doesn't look at a packet and say, this officer violated policy, he needs a 24-hour suspension, then send it to the chain of command. They just say, this officer violated policy. That report gets sent to the chain of command. The chain of command will then look at progressive discipline, the history discipline tracking system, all of that stuff, and make a recommendation for discipline. My case, I can tell you that, there's absolutely no question that I violated a policy of the Columbus Division of Police. The moment that I walked into my first internal affairs investigation, I admitted to doing so. I also said the same thing to the chief and the safety director, so that is not in question at all. The question is, what should the discipline be? So when determining the discipline, they'll look at, guys that have done similar things in the past, this, that, and the other thing. Also, the officer's record as an officer. These things are all considered. The supervisor, the sergeant, will recommend discipline. If it's your first offense, usually they'll recommend a DCC. I think that's called Documented Constructive Criticism. I'm pretty sure that's what DCC stands for. He will then send that up to the lieutenant. The lieutenant might look at that and say, hey, I agree with the sergeant, sign off on it. It just says, I concur, DCC is the appropriate level of discipline. The lieutenant might look at that and say, listen, I think this is a little bit more serious than a DCC. I think this needs to be a letter of written reprimand put in this officer's file. That letter, then he will then say, look, we need to have a letter of reprimand. That's my recommendation. That will go up to the commander. The commander, this is with the Columbus Division of Police, will look at that and he might override the lieutenant. He might say, no, the sergeant's right in this case. I recommend a DCC. He will then send it up to the chief of police. He might also override both of them and say, I think the officer needs to have a 24-hour suspension. That goes then up to basically the chief's office. The chief's office will make a determination on what they think is appropriate, and they will issue the level of discipline that they think is appropriate. Now, where does the FOP fit into all of this? The FOP's job is to make sure that officers are being treated fairly. So if an officer does X and he has a supervisor that doesn't like him, or the chain of command doesn't like him, or maybe the chief of police doesn't like this particular officer, the chain of command will make a recommendation, and then we will get kind of an indication of what the chief's thinking. You can tell what the chief is thinking also by if the chief recommends going outside of normal discipline and decides to departmentally charge an officer, then you really have an idea. Look, they're not looking at this like it's a minor thing. They're looking at this as a serious discipline case. So the FOP will then go to the chief and say, Chief, listen, we realize that you don't like this officer. You might be really mad at this officer, but if you issue discipline that is outside of the norm, we're going to fight you to the nth degree. Normally, when the FOP does this, the chief or whoever the person is that's making the decision will say, you know what, the level of discipline I was thinking about doing is probably not going to stand up to the legal challenges that are going to be brought forth by the FOP. So I'm going to back my recommendation down, and I'm going to put something out there that I think everybody will agree is the appropriate level of discipline. That's what happens most of the time, and that's where the bargaining of the FOP comes into play. The FOP president will actually call up the chief and say, hey, listen, I know you don't like this guy. I know you got a personal problem with him, but just don't do it. Usually that's enough to make it happen. If that doesn't work, and let's say that this officer's sergeant, lieutenant, and commander all recommend low levels of discipline, that goes up through the chain of command. That officer is brought up on what we call departmental charges. And the chief of police says, you know what? I don't like this officer. I don't like what he's doing. I don't agree with him. I'm going to terminate this officer. Well, that is way outside of the realm of what the appropriate level of discipline is. So how do we handle that? That's when you go through the grievance process. Now, if this wasn't a termination case, let's just say this was a written reprimand that the FOP believes should have been brought back down to a DCC, which is a constructive criticism that goes away after a short period of time. It doesn't remain in that officer's file. So for progressive discipline purposes, after like a year or so, it can't be used against him. If it's a letter of reprimand, it's a 2-year. It stays in the file for 2 years, so it's longer. It's a more serious offense, or even a suspension. If the chief recommends a suspension and the FOP believes that it should have just been a letter of reprimand, they will file a grievance. That grievance will go to the chief, and they'll say, "Listen, here's the reasons why we think that you acted inappropriately. Please change your decision." If the chief says, "No, I'm going to stick with that decision," that then goes to the safety director. I believe that these are the steps. The safety director will look at everything, look at all the facts, the circumstances, everything. They will either agree or disagree with the chief of police. If they disagree with the chief of police and they agree with the union, then that level of discipline goes back to whatever the union said. If they don't, then they uphold that 24-hour suspension, whatever it is. If the FOP, if they appeal and it goes all the way to the safety director, and the safety director does not reverse course or change anything, and the FOP still feels very strongly that this was not the appropriate kind of discipline, they then file for arbitration. An arbitrator is kind of like an independent body where you go and you have a hearing. You've got the city on one side of the table. You've got the FOP and the person that they represent on the other side of the table. At the head of the table is an arbitrator. An arbitrator is usually like a lawyer or a retired judge that is going to look at both sides and determine what level or who is right in this situation. The FOP has been taking the city of Columbus and the department to an arbitrator very frequently lately, and they've actually had quite a few disciplinary cases overturned because the current administration with the current chief has potentially shown a pattern of issuing excessive discipline. So in my case, I went through my investigation. My sergeant recommended a DCC. My lieutenant recommended a DCC. Very low levels of discipline. My commander looked at it and said, you know what? I think this is a little bit more serious than your most basic levels of discipline. I would like to put a letter of reprimand in his file. That's something that sits there for 2 years. If you do the same thing again, then you're subject for suspensions or progressive discipline. That's what we call it. My case, this went up to the chain of command. The deputy chief of patrol said, I think this is a lot more serious. I think we need to have called a four cause show cause hearing and departmental charges. They brought me up on departmental charges, saying, look, this is very serious. You're looking at a suspension. A suspension would be a deviation from progressive discipline. Therefore, you have to go before the chief. I went before the chief, had my interview with the chief. Once again, did the same things that I did when I went to internal affairs, took responsibility for my actions, explained exactly what I did and how I did it and why I did it. Said, you know what, chief, something like this is never going to happen again. I really need to get back to work. I'm looking forward to get back to work, serving the citizens of Columbus and getting this all behind me. The chief heard that and then, waited a period of time. I don't remember how long it was between my hearing and the chief's decision. Chief comes down and says, you know what, you're fired. So I got sent home from work. You get sent home from work when you're fired and you still have one more appeal. You make that appeal to the safety director. So I had to have another hearing. I have a hearing with the safety director. bunch of attorneys from the city were there. The FOP was there. Some people from the Division of Police are there. Told the safety director the same thing that I told the chief of police. Look, I accept responsibility for my actions. I made a mistake. Very clearly, I made a mistake that I shouldn't have made. I'm ready to go back to work. Get this all behind me. Safety director, it was like 2 days later, they sent some officers to my house, actually a lieutenant and a commander. They said, hey, here's your paperwork. You've been fired. That's when this whole process starts, you know? So in the eyes of the FOP and the attorneys that I deal with and everything, the discipline that was issued to me is excessive. They say, you know what, based on past practices, this officer's record, who he is as a person, the reason he did it, all these other things, there's a lot of mitigating factors here. Termination is not appropriate. So they filed for arbitration. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not like privy to all of the little steps, and I don't think that they're necessarily important, but basically you file some paperwork and you get assigned an arbitrator. So we now have this guy who's going to sit at the end of the table. We know who he is. We know about him. We know his past, how he likes to, I don't know, do his job, for lack of a better term. We know who he is. So we contact him and we say, hey, listen, well, my attorney actually got a hold of me, said, hey, in these months, what dates are you available? Or are you out of town or got anything going on during these dates? I write him back and I said, you know what? I'm available for all of those dates. Let's get this done. He submits those dates to the arbitrator. The arbitrator picks some of those dates, says, these are the dates that I'm available, sends them to the city. The city of Columbus came back and said, you know what? None of those dates work for us. So then we bump it out a couple of months. We pick another group of dates. We send it off to the arbitrator. The arbitrator picks some dates, send them to the city. The city agrees, hey, we've got a date. There's a date right there. I think that we're free. We can all sit down and have this meeting with the arbitrator. That meeting for me is coming up. It's going to be before the end of July. I don't want to put the date out there. I have to be very careful about putting out too much information at this point in time, but I do have a date. I know when the date is. It's coming up sooner rather than later. So we're going to do our thing. My attorney is going to have some things to say. I'm going to have some things to say. The city is going to have some things to say to try to justify their position. Then the arbitrator is going to make his decision. How does the arbitrator make his decision? I found this out very recently about the length of time that this process takes. So once we have the hearing, the attorneys for the city and the attorneys for the FOP have 30 days to submit, I think it's called a case brief. So they will submit their case briefs. The city is going to say, listen, here's what we believe happened in the hearing. Here's our paperwork. The FOP is going to say, here's our perspective on what happened in the hearing. Here's our paperwork. The arbitrator is then going to look at all of the paperwork. Also, he's going to have recordings of the incident, of the hearing. He's going to have his own recollection of how things went, and he's going to deliberate. I don't believe there's any kind of timeline on how long he has to deliberate on this. So you have the hearing date, and then 30 days after that, he starts the deliberation. So he won't start his deliberation until sometime in August. That could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to a year. I'm trying to be conservative and expecting 3 to 6 months. So I have a hearing in July. There's a chance that his decision could come down by the end of 2025. That's basically all I know at this point in time. That is where I'm at in the process, and that's the best update that I can give you. With all of that being said, I feel very confident about my chances. It's kind of weird because it sounds like you're gambling in that kind of sense, but this isn't a gamble in my view. This is a very clear case of the city overstepping their bounds and taking things to an extreme because of a personal problem that they have with me due to the nature of my First Amendment and my personal beliefs. I feel very strongly about that, and I feel very strongly about the fact that that the arbitrator is going to rule in my favor. After that, I'll get to go back to work. Where I belong, working on the hilltop in the city of Columbus, doing the things that I was meant to do. And I'm looking very much forward to that opportunity. that's how the process is going to work. And that's really about all I have to say about that. Before I let you go, I did want to take a moment just to say thank you. I wanted to thank everybody that's supporting me, whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You know, the fact that I have so much support from the community means a lot to me. It helps me keep things in perspective, and it helps remind me that I'm actually not the person that some people are trying to say that I am. If I was that guy, I wouldn't have the kind of popular support that I have. I wouldn't be able to show my face out in public. You know, I go out in public and I get recognized by people, and people come up to shake my hand and say, "Man, you're getting screwed over. I'm thinking about you." That means a lot to me. It really does. It helps fortify my belief that I'm the good guy in this situation. And I can't even begin to tell you how beneficial that is to my state of mind, my psyche. Means a lot to me. You know, the other thing it should go without saying, but it needs to be said, is thank you to everybody who is helping to support me financially. I can't even begin to put into words how much that means to me. You know, without your support, I wouldn't be able to feed my family right now. When the city did this to me, it's my strong belief that they knew that this discipline wasn't going to stand. They knew that they were in the wrong the minute that they did this. They knew that this was eventually going to get overturned by an arbitrator, but they were so angry with me that they wanted to make sure that they could punish me. The punishment for me isn't going to be the final decision that the arbitrator is going to make. The punishment is them being able to put their thumb on me, push me down into the mud, and make my life difficult for a period of 9 months to a year. The way the city is punishing me is by punishing my wife and my children, by making it hard for me to provide for them. That is the city's goal. The city wants to teach me a lesson, make an example of me, and also teach a lesson to every single other officer and firefighter in the city. Says if you come out and you tell the truth and you expose some of the things that we're doing behind closed doors that we don't want the public to see, we will take away your ability to feed and provide for your family. I'm very fortunate that I have these social media accounts, that I have people like you guys that have been providing for me financially, literally putting food on the table, clothes on my kids' back, and keeping me in my house. I really appreciate everything that you're doing. By supporting me financially and doing the things that you're doing, you're making sure that this evil act by the city is not a win. We can't let evil win in this situation. And you supporting me is helping me in that battle. So thank you very much. I think that's all I want to say in this video today. There's a lot I would like to say, but I can't say. Once we get through this arbitration process, I've got all the documents and everything. I'll show you everything. But for right now, all I can say is thank you for supporting me. We're almost through this. I'll talk to you guys later.